Well, hello, patrons and everybody on YouTube. Happy Thursday. Are we live? Are we there yet? Yes, we are. Happy Thursday, everybody. Getting ready to record episode number 38 of Mike in the Midwest. I'm going to tell some high school stories coming your way. We're going to do more of these down the road, but just a few today. Talk about where I went to high school and why that's important. Yes, I have a cut. I know. I'm very self-conscious about that. I nicked myself shaving this morning. I was in a hurry and nicked my right under my nose. So I have a little spot. I got it. Yep. Got a little crazy with the razor. I apologize. I know you can't put a band-aid there either. You can't really cover it up. I'm just like a high school kid, right? Learning how to shave. All right. If you're there, I see folks are tuned in. Hopefully you're having a great Thursday morning. Let's get cracking so we can get you off to lunch. All right, let's talk high school stories. And we're going to do more, like I said, more of these as we progress through the series of stories, but, not back to back. I just want to intersperse. I have tons of high school stories. All right, let's do this. Let's get to the feedback first. Well, hey, everybody. Happy Thursday and welcome to another episode of Mike in the Midwest, a podcast for the patrons of the Be Our Guest podcast. Thank you so much for supporting the podcast in the most appreciated way possible. You guys are making financial contributions to help us put out 4 episodes a week, plus the live shows on Sunday nights. We try to consistently do that so that you always have something to listen to in your feed as you head off to work or school or take the dog for a walk or, just hang out with the family. We always try to keep it family friendly, stuff the kids can enjoy just along with the parents. And if you're a single person, hey, these are memories as well. We're all in this together and we all get to experience Disney in different ways. And I hope you're enjoying these kind of adjacent shows. Of course, they are not Disney focused over here on Mike in the Midwest, but we do talk Disney sometimes, but there is a little bit to life outside of Disney. And I'm always, is a podcast fan, and I've said this on the main podcast many times. I love podcasts because anybody can put out a show, and it doesn't have to be some kind of famous radio personality or somebody who is in $1 million studio, downtown St. Louis or wherever, Austin, Texas, or wherever it is. Anybody, with a little hope and a dream can put together a podcast. And those are the shows I tend to really enjoy. I've said this before, but some of the shows I listen to, of course, are Disney focused because I like to keep up on the news and I get to see a lot of my other podcaster friends at Walt Disney World and at media events that we get to go to and so forth. But some of the shows that I really enjoy are shows that are put on and have very small audiences. For example, there's a show called You Don't Know Flack, and it's a show just about retro computing, like Commodore 64s and what it was like to grow up in the 80s, very much similar to what I try to do here in a way. And he's just a guy down in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, talks about growing up as a kid in the 80s in a town called Yukon, Oklahoma, and tells us stories about, going down to the creek or, like we did last week, games that they played in their neighborhood and what it was like in their neighborhood and the software store that his family owned for a brief period of time. So, it doesn't have a huge audience, but it's somebody who is passionate and lets me, for 45 minutes, relive some of the memories that I had growing up in St. Louis. And, and some of those memories I don't have. I didn't have a lot of the same experiences, but it's fun to see how somebody just to the southwest of where I live had similar and different experiences. Another show that I like to listen to that, doesn't have a huge following, but it does have a following is called the 2600 Game by Game podcast. And it's just a guy, I believe he's out in New Jersey, named Ferg. And he's attempting to go through every single Atari 2600 cartridge and give a full kind of background on the story of the game, the developers, the art on the box, and stuff like that, high scores. It's just fun because he does it because he's passionate about it. He's not making a living at it. But it's kind of fun because I played a lot of those games. Many I didn't because I did have an Atari 2600, but I didn't have a huge budget for cartridges. So I had, I had probably in the end, maybe 20 cartridges, that I collected for birthdays and Christmases and mowing lawns and so forth. But, when he gets on a game like Frogger, I remember getting that for Christmas one year. And so it brings back so many memories when he talks about playing Frogger. But then there's a ton of other games. Like today, he did a show on Mario Brothers, which I didn't have, and I had no idea that it was out on the 2600. So it's kind of fun just to listen to shows and hear people's stories. And I hope you enjoy that over here. We always try to just kind of tell you what it was like to grow up in Missouri. I wasn't in rural Missouri. I was in suburban Missouri. As I've mentioned many times, I grew up in a town called Florissant, which was it still is, it's still there. And I lived there until just about a year and a half ago. I spent my first 46 years of my life there. It's a suburb of about 50,000 people, about 15 miles north of downtown St. Louis. So pretty close to St. Louis, but suburban, wasn't an urban area. So that's where my stories all come from. So today we are going to be talking some of my high school stories, and I have so many high school stories. I loved high school. I don't know how you felt about high school, but I loved it. I had so much fun. I'm a social person. I like to get involved with things. And so we'll kind of talk about that today, but I'll intersperse more high school stories as we go through the timeline here of Mike in the Midwest. But yeah, high school was fun for me. And I think it's because we had a really good high school. But we'll talk about that here in a second. But I do want to hit the feedback from last week's shows. Last week, we talked about games we played outside because I was already looking forward to daylight savings time kicking in here, which is going to happen here in this coming weekend, which I can't wait. Now, of course, the weather in the Midwest this past week was unbelievable. We had like 75-degree highs, sunny weather. It was a little windy, but just beautiful weather. And now that we're going to get that extra hour of daylight after Sunday, the highs are only going to be about 50 for the next week. And it's going to be raining for the next 5 days. But I mean, it's spring. It's Missouri. It's supposed to happen that way. That's about normal temperatures for us. But I wish we could have gotten that really warm, beautiful weather when it was going to stay light till about 7:30 at night. But hey, you can't have it all. And all things being equal, I'm pretty optimistic. Life is pretty good right now, right? The vaccines seem to be rolling out pretty well. Instead of the daily deluge of bad news about the pandemic, we're getting hit with some good news every now and then. That's a pretty good thing. We're getting some optimistic signs. People are getting back to work. Travel. People are planning trips for 2021. That's always good for me. And it's good for the spirit. It's good for everybody. I think we need to, we hunkered down for so long. It's good just to maybe get in the car and go on a road trip, to be able to go to your local zoo or your local botanical garden. But I mean, we're Disney fans, right? We want to go down to the Flower and Garden Festival. I know we're planning our summer trip for right after the 4th of July, and I cannot wait to get down there with my family. I've been a couple times with just Mallory and then by myself to go to Give Kids World. But I hunger for the time to sit by the pool with Mallory, Pam, Paige, hopefully. And hopefully some of my friends will also be there at the same time. I miss it. We didn't get to go last summer, and that was hard. I mean, I know that's a first world problem, but we always go. We didn't go last summer, and it was something that I'm really looking forward to because I really did miss it. All right, let's talk about games we played outside. I digress many times on the show, and I apologize for that. So we talked about, all those games that we played in our neighborhood in Florissant on my street, St. Daniel Lane, when I was growing up. And Kathy Melchin, thank you so much for being a patron, Kathy. I appreciate that very much. She said, I just listened on my way home from work, and I know the exact sound you were talking about with the playground ball. That there's a sound with that rubber playground ball. It has a smell too, a playground ball. It says always a sign of spring when the supermarket would have the big container of them near the entrance, and I could get one while food shopping. I forgot about that. Now, not necessarily. So some supermarkets did have the playground balls, but that kind of reminds me, our Kmart and our supermarkets also, they didn't have playground balls, but they had these. Oh man, they were in like a big pin kind of. It was probably about 7 or 8 feet tall, kind of a wire container, but you could reach in and like. So what they were rubber balls, but they weren't as dense as the playground ball. They were kind of light, but they were kind of white, but with marblish colors on them, pinks and greens and blues. They're kind of marbly looking. They were really light though, because when you kicked them, if there was any kind of wind, they would go zigzagging all over the place. We would get one of those every summer. And we did that even to the time where Paige was like 13. We'd get one every summer and we'd play. We even invented a game. I'll tell you about this real quick. We invented a game at our old house before we moved out here to St. Peters, Missouri. In our old house that we were at, we had a lot of kids on the street, all girls too. It was like Paige and all of her friends, Riley and not the dog, Riley, the neighbor, and just a ton of friends. So they would all come, Megan, they'd all come across Noah, the little brother. And I invented a game called I called it the official game of the summer of 2019, or the official game of the summer of 2012. I always changed the year, so they just made it fun. And basically, here's how the game worked. Everybody stood on our front yard. We had a small front yard, zoysia grass. We had a little bitty ranch house, less than 1,000 square feet. I would kick this ball as high as I could kick it. Now, remember, these light little, $2 balls from the supermarket was zigzag. They go everywhere when you kicked them. I blasted into the air, and I would kick it so to hit off the roof. And then it would bounce, dribble off the top of the roof, and whoever caught it got the point. And everything was legal. You could push, shove, bite, trip, all that stuff. It was so fun because Paige was really aggressive. Nobody got hurt. We didn't let anybody get hurt, but it was kind of fun because there were the rules were there were no rules. You just had to catch the ball before it hit the ground. And they would argue and fight over. We had a good time. I just make sure it didn't get out of control. But that was the official game of the summer of 2016. And every year it would change, and I'd modify the rules a little bit because they got a little bit older every year. So it was kind of fun. Anyway, that was one of those things. Thanks for that memory, Kathy. You just gave me a memory. Not of the playground balls, but of those little, I don't know what they're called. They're just like little balls that you can get at the grocery store even today. All right, some more comments here. Let me get to these. And we have another one from Jonathan Conlon. Jonathan, thank you so much for being a patron. I sure appreciate it. He says, great stories, Mike. Your wiffle ball story was just like our backyard after school ball game growing up. We had a field in a friend's backyard that had 3 trees. So naturally we called it 3 Tree Stadium. Very nice, like 3 rivers. I like it. That's cool. I love knowing that other people were doing this at the same time I was. We would duct tape up a wiffle ball bat and play with a tennis ball. Yes, absolutely. We did stuff like that too. We'd modify it to make it a little more intense. Usually we played 3-on-3. We kept stats in a notebook after every at bat. At the end of our year, we'd have a batting champion, pitching champion, etc. Then in the spring, we would start a new notebook with a new season of stats. Thanks for all you do, bringing happiness and positivity to us. Guys, you guys are doing this for me. You're allowing me to keep the podcast going and hopefully make it better. And hopefully we can have some fun. I love hearing this. I could just picture you guys playing and crowning your pitching. This is our Cy Young winner for wiffle ball, and this is our batting champion. I love that because that's exactly what I did. So thank you for sharing that story, Jonathan. I sure appreciate it. That's awesome. Megan Green, always here on the comments. Megan, hope the kids are doing great. You're doing great. Big trip coming up. She says hide and seek in the dark was the best on my street growing up. I had the best hiding spot on the roof of one of my neighbor's sheds. I won every time when I could get to that spot. Thanks for the tip on kickball. I will pass that on to my sports obsessed boy. He'll be so happy. It's funny you talked about going outside to play games based on TV shows because that's my boy's favorite pastime. They get to go play some video games and watch some TV each day, but then when the time's up, they have to go outside and make up all kinds of games based on Minecraft, Star Wars, Legend of Zelda, you name it. I guess some things never change. Well, I guess some things never change, but I guess the TV shows and the Minecraft and so forth do change. Video game type games. Because we played Dukes of Hazzard. One person was Roscoe, and then you would either be Bo or Luke. And then if there was any girl, she always had to be Daisy. And she had to be in Dixie, the Jeep Wrangler. And, we were in the Charger, the General. I know that show's not great, but I mean, we just, all it was a way to kind of live out. And we thought we were jumping a river or something. Basically, we were on our little Huffy bikes, jumping out like over 3 bricks with like a little ramp that was maybe 6 inches off the ground. But in our mind, we were flying like the General Lee on Dukes of Hazzard, and then we play Airwolf and all those shows. Knight Rider. Hey, Kit. Talking to your wrist, Kit, come get me. It was, oh my gosh, we had so much fun. Bill Ogg, thank you so much, Bill, for being a patron. I appreciate you being here. He says, great show, Mike. Wiffle ball was big in my neighborhood. We also had the lawn chair strike zone. Yes, nobody can argue with the lawn chair. My brother could curve the ball behind the batter and hit the chair. That's not fair. That's pretty awesome. I grew up in the suburbs of Philly in South Jersey. My uncle, who was from South Philly, taught us a bunch of urban games like stick ball, half ball, and some kind of steps ball, but our favorite was wire ball. Our street had a perfect set of 4 wires going from one telephone pole to another. It was a 2-player game where each player stood at separate poles. One player threw a tennis ball at the wires. The lowest wire was a single, the next wire was a double, and so on to a home run. If you missed a wire, it was a strike. If you hit a wire, but the other player caught it, you were out. There was some strategy involved. You wanted to throw hard so the ball would bounce back down hard. My brothers and I would play that for hours. My wife and I grew up in the same neighborhood. She said a few years ago that nobody played that game that we made it up. She says only you and your idiot brothers played that game. So hopefully somebody here has played wireball and can give some validation. LOL. Bill, hey, we don't have wires here. They're all underground. We're in the because we kind of moved to like a newer place. It was built probably 20 years ago. But man, I'm in for that game. If I can find some wires, we're out in South Philly. I'm up for that. My arm can still get it out there a little bit. I'm a lefty, but I would totally play that. And remember, my dad's buddy pitched for the Phillies at about that time. John Denny won the Cy Young, pitched in the World Series against the O's. Maybe you remember him. That's awesome. I got wireball. I've never heard of that, but that's a genius game. In stickball, yeah, we had that around here. We just played wiffle ball. But like the stories were always like, oh, you gotta play stickball. And we did kind of try to play it a couple times, but we played wiffle ball. All right. Thank you so much for the feedback. Please, if you have any feedback on the games you played outside, leave it. It's not too late to leave that. You can leave it on today's show. I don't mind. We'll share it next week. And everybody's got high school stories. So share those under today's video or audio, whichever feed you're getting here on Patreon. And again, I appreciate you being here. Let's get to today's topic, high school stories. So before we get to the high school stories, let me share kind of a little bit about where I went to high school and why that's important if you grow up specifically in St. Louis. And I don't know why this is, but in St. Louis, there is a tradition. Maybe you've heard that we have like gooey butter cake. That's something we're known for, which is an awesome dessert. It's even hard to describe. It's ooey and it's gooey and it's good. But we also have toasted ravioli. We're kind of known for that. Awesome. Dip it in some sauce, marinara sauce. Oh, so good. We have something called the Arch. You've probably seen that on TV, big steel thing, 630 feet tall, 630 feet leg to leg. But another thing that we have that's weird about St. Louisans is we always ask each other where you went to high school. I don't think this is a thing in many other cities around the country and around the world, but I'm not kidding. You come up to somebody, you meet them in town, you get a new teacher, you're working in an elementary school like I did for years, get some new staff. First thing you ask them, where'd you go to high school? And so you find out everything about them by their high school. It's weird. Like we judge people by where you went to high school. Oh, you went to Incarnate Word. Oh, you went to the private Catholic school, Catholic girls school. And they were great at basketball and smart kids went there. So, this person's probably very smart. You had to be smart to be in there. You knew if they went to private school, public school, what part of town they were from. You learned a lot. But seriously, even to this day, if I meet neighbors, they ask, hey, where'd you go to high school? My neighbor next door went to the high school. He went to the high school of the district we live in now at our new house. And so that's kind of interesting. He hasn't left, and I tell him, I went to Hazelwood Central, which let me kind of give you a little background on Hazelwood Central. So I mentioned that Hazelwood Central, again, was a huge high school by public school standards. We had about 2,500 students in our high school. I went to that school from 1989 to 1992, class of 92. I know I'm ancient, right? But this was, of course, in my town of Florissant, Missouri. This was one of the high schools in our town, the biggest high school in one of the biggest school districts in the state of Missouri. It's called the Hazelwood School District, still there. What's kind of interesting is we have the trio completed because I graduated from Hazelwood Central High School. My wife graduated from Hazelwood East High School, and my daughter Paige graduated from Hazelwood West High School, which are the three Hazelwood high schools. So we kind of joke about that we've hit all three high schools. So anyway, back to my high school. Again, graduated in 92, large high school. I think my class had about 800 in the 700 to 800 in the graduating class by the time we got to graduation. To me, high school was it was a great time. It was a great time. I know some people, have difficulties in high school and it's a challenging 4 years. I will say that I really looked forward to it because, again, I've talked about this on the show. I went to a very small private elementary school from kindergarten or from 2nd to 6th grade. There was only one class for each grade. So I had the exact same kids in my classes every year. Only one class, so you knew exactly who was going to be in your class from year to year to year. You got a couple new kids every once in a while, and you lost a couple sometimes, but pretty much same kids, for the 5-year period you were there. And we didn't have a gym. We didn't have any. It was a small church-based school, so we didn't have a lot of stuff. Then we moved after 6th grade to a new house that my family built right near Hazelwood Central High School, so we could get into that school district. And again, academics is super important. I always try to get good grades, and we'll talk about that as we go through this. But Hazelwood Central was probably the school, the high school in the state of Missouri at that time for athletics. They were really good at football. It was either us or Hazelwood East, where my wife went for the state championship for that period of time, for like that decade. We were always going to be one of the champions in high school football. Other than that, there was a school in Kansas City called Kansas City Rockhurst. It was either Central or East against Rockhurst to play for the high school championship. They were also good at baseball. They were good at basketball. We had a lot of, when you have a school that big, you're bound to be good at sports because you have a larger pool of kids to pull from. Anyway, so my dad was into sports, obviously. And so, a good academic district. So we moved into the district out of where we used to live. And so I went to Hazelwood Junior High, which was 7th and 8th grade. And I'll talk about that in a separate show. But that was kind of setting us up for our high school experience. Some kids from Hazelwood Junior High would go on to Hazelwood West, and some of us went on to Hazelwood Central. Now, I will tell you that in my opinion, I thought Hazelwood Central was definitely the best of the 3 Hazelwood high schools. But again, I went there, right? I had the Hawk pride. We were the Hazelwood Central Hawks. And our school colors, ironically enough, black and gold. So, if you see me here on the feed, anytime I'm recording the podcast, 90 times out of 100, I have on black and gold for Mizzou. But I've lived in black and gold since middle school because those were our high school colors. And I love black and gold. I'm very true to my sports teams and I'm very loyal. If I'm your friend, I'm a friend forever. And same way with my sports teams and my alma mater. Anyway, so Hazelwood Central, very large building. It's one of those things that, as we had freshman orientation and we got over to Hazelwood Central to kind of look at it and try to find our classrooms. It was unbelievable. I mean, it was so big. And I'm sure you had the same experience, unless maybe you went to a private school, of that first kind of eyes wide open experience when you walk into your high school. For example, at Hazelwood Central, we had basically like 4 main halls that were perpendicular to this one long hall that was called A Hall. We called it, the halls had 8 names. You had A Hall, B Hall, C, D, and E was kind of often an annex. So A Hall, if you can picture this, was one long hall that was over a quarter of a mile long. Now, how do I know it was over a quarter of a mile long? I know that because when it was cold at the beginning of baseball season, and pitchers, we could only throw so many days before your arm would kind of get sore. So they kind of protected you. You'd throw hard one day, then you'd take a couple days off, but you had to practice. You had to be there. And so what did pitchers have to do? We had to run. I hated running. Let me say it again. I hated running in high school. But when it was cold and we were inside for our workouts, pitchers would just have to run A Hall forever. We ran up and down that thing. So one time down, quarter of a mile, back half a mile, back down 3/4 of a mile, back down, there's 1 mile. And we just go back and down and up and down that hall. And all the other halls came off that hall. So if you went to, if you're going from B Hall to C Hall, you would just go, up B, down A, and then down to C. Didn't really matter. You can probably find a Google map of Hazelwood Central online and kind of see the layout of the building. But it was really cool because we had a swimming pool in our school. We had a huge it wasn't a huge theater, but it was a pretty decent theater. I think it seated 600 people for visual arts. We had 2 gymnasiums, one for the varsity athletics, which was a huge gymnasium. And then we had the small gym, which was back before when this, again, kind of like any other district, Hazelwood Central in the beginning was the only Hazelwood high school. It was just called Hazelwood High. And then they built West, they built East, and they called ours Central, and they added on, obviously, many times. So the small gym was just the gym way back in the Stone Age. But then it became the small gym because they built a huge gym at the one end of the building. So we had racquetball courts, we had tennis courts, we had 3 baseball fields, we had a huge football stadium because we were also the state football champions many times in the 80s and early 90s. Um, track, trying to think what else we had. We had, two gigantic soccer fields. I mean, it's a big campus. And it was kind of cool to get to go there. I appreciated that because I didn't have any of that stuff in elementary school. Junior high, we had a little bit of it, but nothing like this. So, high school stories. Let's talk about high school stories. I have a lot of them. So, a lot of my stories will kind of revolve around things I did, activities, clubs I was involved in. One of the things, and you think I'm going to talk about sports, but I'm not going to talk about sports first. One of the things that I got asked to join, or I was asked to submit an application for, was this thing called peer leaders, and it was strange because I didn't know anything about this group, but my counselor, and again in high school, I don't know how you guys did it, but we had a counselor like that was they had the freshman class from like letters R to Q or something like that. And so my counselor, they were putting this group together called the peer leaders my freshman year. And I believe her name was Mrs. Yergin. And she reached out to me and asked if I wanted to, fill out this application to become a peer leader. And I'm like, well, what is that? And so she told me, it's a group of students that you're going to get to do some cool stuff. You're going to get to interact with peer leaders from the other other high schools around St. Louis, get to do some training, just basically kind of be hosts for events at the high school. And again, I wanted to get involved. I was excited. And so she did. Some of the other friends in my circle of friends got asked as well. And so we all kind of filled out the application and got selected, and we got to be in this group called peer leaders. And I will tell you that this was a fun thing. And this is one piece of advice I would give to students and parents of students that are getting ready to have children go into middle and high school. 2 words: get involved. Get into sports, get into music, get into visual arts, get into performing arts, get into academic clubs. The more you're involved, the more fun you're going to have in high school. And I was told this not only by my parents, but by others. And it's absolutely true. So I got into this peer leaders thing, even though I was like, oh, I don't know what this is. And I don't even know if I want to do it, but I'll try it. So I did. And the thing is that we got to do some really cool stuff. We got to go through some trainings, and the trainings meant we got to miss school for the entire day. We'd go over there was a big banquet, kind of like not a banquet hall, but a big hall at the hospital, a Christian Northeast Hospital, which was in our district. And the St. Louis County Police would come in and tell us, prevention signs for people that were depressed, teenagers, how to avoid alcohol situations, how to, be a positive role model for the students at your high schools. And the thing is, we did all these trainings with the peer leaders from Hazelwood East, Hazelwood West, other high schools around St. Louis. So it was fun. It wasn't a sporting event, but I did this all 4 years. And because of that, we got to, do some skits on the in-house TV. Sometimes we would be asked to kind of speak to our peers, as far as what we learned at these trainings, as far as, being somebody who could positively look out and impact others in a positive way. So that was something that was totally unexpected. I didn't even go after it. They just asked me and some of my friends, and we joined it. And we had a good time. We got to host students from other high schools when they came to visit our high school. We got to go to their high school and see how they did things. We got to interact with teachers on kind of, focus groups, how could we make classes better? What kind of stuff would help you learn? It was a great opportunity because we felt our voices were heard. And again, that was an unexpected part of high school that I wouldn't have done otherwise, but I just said, why not? And so I did it, and it led to a lot of fun experiences. So that was kind of one of those unexpected things. Now, I will say in high school, I had a core group of friends, and there were 4 of us that really kind of went together really well. And I kind of want to get into them before we get out of here today and kind of share, because they're going to be involved in a lot of these stories that I'm going to share. Maybe next week I'll do the second part of this so we can kind of get into this, but I want to give you the cast, right? So I was there, and one of the things that I've done throughout my whole life, because I'm super competitive, is I got pretty good grades. I always tried to get a 4.0 or straight A's. I didn't always get straight A's. And I have a great story to share about my senior year when I thought I might flunk out of high school, even though I had a really high grade point average. But some some semesters or some quarters I would get a 4.0 straight A's. Some quarters I wouldn't. I usually got at least a 3.5 just so that I kept myself out of trouble and kept the cumulative grade point average where I needed it to be because I was always scared about getting in college. But the bottom line is the only reason I got good grades is because I am super competitive. I didn't want to have, a 2.9 grade point average when all my friends, which I'm going to talk about now, they were the top of the class. Well, at least two of the three were. So my one friend was named Corey. And this kid, he had moved to our subdivision. He lived about 2 streets over from me. I lived in a subdivision called Fox Lake. And he was taller than me. And he was a country boy, man. He was from like out in the country in Illinois. His family just moved over. His mom ended up being my boss when I taught gifted education. She was the director of the gifted center. So she actually brought me over when she knew me and she knew I taught in the district. She's like, you got to come over and teach gifted for us. So I ended up working for his mom forever, but his name was Corey. And I met him freshman year basketball tryouts. And so when you're a freshman at Hazelwood Central, any of the sports, because freshman year, everybody's got a dream, right? Everybody's going to make the team. For example, and I'll talk about baseball tryouts in an upcoming show, but for example, for baseball tryouts, we had 127 kids try out to make the freshman baseball team. 127 kids. You should have seen the first day of tryouts. Like you could not, we were playing catch and it was like the line to play catch was probably 100 yards long. It was, I couldn't believe it when I saw it. I was like, I'm not going to make this team. And I was pretty good at baseball. I was like, this is just too many people. How do I, for one thing, I was tall and left-handed. That helped, but it was just crazy. So anyway, we're trying out for basketball. And I want to say 50 or 60 kids tried out for the freshman basketball team. And I do remember that because we were freshmen, there wasn't enough space for us to practice in the high school gyms because the varsity got the big gym and there was a girls and a boys team. The JV team got the small gym, girls and boys, they divided that. Where did we get the freshmen? No, we had to get on a bus and go over to the junior high. That was our gym. We had to practice at the junior high and try out at the junior high. And all I remember was it was like maybe late October that we tried out. And the first thing you had to do was like run 2 miles out on the track. And it was just nasty weather. It was just cold and it was misty and raining. And I remember we're running that track before we even get in to get the, basketballs out and do any drills, layups and shooting and all that stuff. And we're running this track and this kid, he comes up to me. He's like, I still remember it, Corey. He comes up to me and he says, man, what are we doing? I was like, I don't know. What are we doing? Like, I want to play basketball. He's like, me too, man. He's like, I'm from outstate Illinois. It's like Indiana where I grew up. Like basketball is everything. And this kid was taller than me. And he was a nice kid, but he was a country boy still. Like he still had all the country in him. Like picture the movie Hoosiers. That was Corey. And he's like, man, what are we doing, man? I got to make this team, but I don't know, man, this is miserable. I said, I know. What are we doing? This is crazy. But so long story short with basketball, we became good friends because we hung out together and he lived near me and we became best friends for 4 or 5 years. And, so what happened was the weather was so nasty. I ended up getting mono during basketball tryouts and I ended up being in the hospital for 5 days. Missed 18 days of school in a row because I was so sick. I was sick and I think it was just, I got wore down from all the basketball tryouts and everything that was going on. So I made the team, but I couldn't play because my liver got swelled up and they said if I got hit in the liver in a contact sport, it would kill me. So I didn't play, even though I was kind of on the team my freshman year. I practiced where I could, but yeah, I kind of missed out. But Corey made the team, so I kind of got to live through Corey. And he made the sophomore team, the JV team, and the varsity team, so we always cheered him on. But yeah, that was the first time I met Corey. Just like, what are we doing at basketball tryouts? But we made it through, and he made the team, and he was a good ball player. The other two friends that I had very closely in high school, Fred, my good friend Fred Lai, and he was his family was of Chinese descent and very, very intense. Everything with Fred, and he was not a sports person, but he was academically driven. He had to be the valedictorian. He had to be. And he was always so nervous about everything. And Corey and I were always cutting up. You know how I am. Corey was just like me. We were always playing jokes on people. And Corey got really good grades. I got good grades, but not like Fred. Like if Fred didn't have the highest grade in class on every assignment, he freaked out. And so we had a lot of fun at his expense over the next 4 years. But we were in a class with Fred, and he was a nice guy, and we all became friends. Our other friend that became good friends with us was Ray Sendejas. He was from a Mexican family, and just a great, nice guy. And he was very intense too. He was like Fred. I think Fred, just spoiler alert, ended up graduating as the co-valedictorian. And I think Ray ended up graduating third in the class. Corey and I, not so much. I think I graduated 41st. And I think Corey was right there with me. We were in the 40s, both of us. But I mean, it was out of like 700. So come on, we weren't that bad. But Ray was just this really nice guy, but super smart, super smart. And so the four of us would all hang out. So it was just, that was our core group. And I'm going to tell you about the time that we got Fred thinking that he had been expelled from school. Yeah, got him almost thinking he was expelled from school. We did some cool stuff with Ray, messing with him. And I have so many stories, but that is where I'm going to lead off for today. You're going to hear so many fun stories, pranks we played at the high school. But that's kind of a background of where I went to high school and how I met these friends. Fred and Ray were friends. So when we became friends with Fred, Ray came along, and then the four of us kind of became inseparable for 4 years. But we'll talk about that. But what I want to hear about is not really your stories yet, because I'm going to share some more of those next week. But what was your high school like? Did you go to a big public high school, a small private high school, somewhere in between? What was your school like? And did you have a positive high school experience? Did you love it? I did. Some people didn't like it. They just kind of endured it. And I got to do some cool stuff my senior year outside of the classroom for a few hours a day, which was really cool too. But I'm going to share that in an upcoming episode. But I want to hear about your high school experiences, so drop them in on the comments below. All right, we're going to get out of here. We'll be back again next Thursday. I hope everybody is doing great. Spring is here. Sleep fast this weekend because you get one less hour of sleep. But hey, we get more daylight each day, which is pretty awesome. So everybody out there, stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you real soon. All right, see you, everybody.